I'd like to announce where the new center will be built. Just kidding. It's an honor for me to be here today to introduce our keynote speakers. I'm honored to introduce and welcome home our two keynote speakers. Dr. John Fehrenbacher and Dr. Dan Beckman grew up here in Evansville, and well, let me get this straightened out here. These two physicians have very similar backgrounds. Dr. John Fehrenbacher grew up on the west side of the county, is one of 8 children. He has 3 brothers and 4 sisters. He knew at a young age, after spending time in the hospital, that he wanted to be a physician. He grew up, as I said, in western Vanderbilt County, and graduated from Mater Dei High School in 1968. Dr. Dan Beckman is one of 8 children as well. He has 3 brothers and 4 sisters. He knew early on in high school that medicine was in his future. He grew up a few blocks from Memorial High School, and graduating from Memorial in 1971. Both of these physicians' fathers were self-made men and started their own businesses. John's dad was a carpenter and started Fehrenbacher Cabinets. Dan Beckman's father was an engineer whose business was in his home, where he spent his time developing non-stick compounds such as Teflon for industry. After high school, these 2 outstanding leaders went to Indiana University and then went to medical school at the Indiana University School of Medicine. These 2 individuals are pioneers in our state in the medical practices. Dr. Fehrenbacher performed the first lung transplant in 1989, the first heart and lung transplant in 1989, the first bilateral lung transplant in 1991. Dr. Beckman performed the first balloon mapping in the state in 1988. He performed the first maze procedure in 1991, and the first multi-vessel off-pump coronary artery bypass in 1997. Because of these 2 gifted cardiothoracic surgeons, IU has one of the premier cardiothoracic programs in the nation. These 2 individuals complement each other well. While they are individuals, they have a common belief that the most perfect tools were not created by man. In fact, a person's hands and the things that can be done with them are the best instruments God has ever created. It's my honor and privilege to welcome home Dr. John Fehrenbacher and Dr. Dan Beckman.
Senior in this group, so I'll go first. I'd like to welcome Bishop Thompson, all the generous supporters, the honored students, the parents. 45 years ago, I graduated from Mater Dei, and I'd like to share with you what's transpired over these 45 years. There are many opportunities and careers that you can choose from. So many choices. At times for the students, I'm sure it's anxiety-provoking and sometimes just downright overwhelming. So let me tell you about my 45 years through medicine and to give you some idea what a career might be now that it's behind me for the most part. It's interesting what made me choose medicine, sort of an odd story. Matter of fact, my brothers said that they couldn't make a cabinet maker out of me, so they sent me to medical school. seriously, as it was an accidental injury when I was in the second grade that was a bit of a threat to my life as well as limb. And through the dedication of a local surgeon and my family support, I not only survived that injury, but I ended up playing football for Mater Dei, ran numerous half marathons and a full marathon. I call that event when I was 7, sort of a silver lining to a cloud. All months recovering, I realized what an impact that surgeon made on my life and my first many individuals that would impact my future. You students may not have such a dramatic event in your life. I hope you don't. But likely something will click and direct or slowly evolve to help you in the workforce. Right now, you're surrounded by all types of individuals and careers. For them, the good news is they only gave me 10 minutes to talk. For the students looking to the future, let me tell you about a career in medicine, my 45 years. At Mater Dei, I got my first interest in biology, anatomy, chemistry, which all meshed very well, I thought, with medicine. And I stayed locally. It started at U of E, then USI. I had a great mentor at USI in life sciences that made learning fun. Then on to Indianapolis for 4 years. During my 4th years in medical school, again, there was an individual, a surgery resident, that persuaded me into a career of surgery. As my surgical skills developed, another individual, now a cardiac surgeon, influenced me to my final decision, cardiac surgery. So now, 15 years of training later, I finally had a job. Thank God my wife and family thought. But for me, the time passed rapidly, was challenging, a lot of hard work, but eminently rewarding. And I had a lot of fun along the way, but as most of you have heard before, no pain, no gain. So in '83, I started a cardiac surgery practice in Indianapolis. This is right when heart transplantation was being developed nationally. No private institution in the country had taken on the challenge. I had the opportunity to work with another great mentor, Dr. from Stanford, who's really the brains behind heart transplantation in the world. Then in the 80s, a more difficult organ to transplant was the lung transplant. Research now was being done in Canada. By now, Dr. Beckman had joined our group, and we helped develop this program for the state of Indiana for people dying of end-stage lung disease. Together, we performed the first heart-lung transplant in the Midwest. I recall a young girl from Indiana, actually, who was dying from cystic fibrosis at that time, and her parents had traveled to the Mayo Clinic to desperately save her life. The docs at the Mayo Clinic told them after their initial consult, well, the only place we know now doing lung transplant in the Midwest are two surgeons in Annapolis. So back they came. I did a successful heart-lung transplant on her. For the work in lung transplant, I was honored to get an honorary PhD from USI. The bittersweet of this was the day I received the PhD, the patient died. Again, we tried, and we thought we gave some extra time, but it failed early. The good that came from this painful loss was that we demanded of ourselves to learn, and learn we did. So for the next heart-lung transplant patient that we did, actually ended up participating in the Transplant Olympics as a runner. Now one of our junior partners runs this program, and this program now is ranked in the top 10 in the country. This brings up some obvious points and a bit of a temporary divergence from my career. Note all the individuals that shape one's life. Note success is not without failure. And we learn from our failures, and as I always felt, if you learn from a failure, it's really much more tolerable. So that was the first 10 years of my 30-year career. But the next 20 years, which I really feel was my biggest accomplishment. There was a dreaded disease called thoracic and thoracoabdominal aneurysms. Probably means nothing to most of you. It's not very common. But this disease caused sudden death, both in young and old patients, from a sudden rupture of the aorta. 20 years ago, most cardiac surgeons referred these to Texas, which was considered the aortic surgery capital of the world. Well-known names like Dr. Denton Coulee and Michael DeBakey, Stanley Crawford were the three there that were tackling these operations, but with at best a 50% survival. But that was obviously better than nothing. Over the ensuing years, I felt that this problem surely could be improved upon. I actually remember talking with Dr. Stanley Crawford. He's now in his late 70s when I talked to him 20 years ago. He told me, well, Dr. Fehrenbacher, some things just can't be prevented. And I didn't believe that. Over the next 20 years, I worked, I pondered about, I researched in the animal lab and operated on patients trying desperately to help improve their lives. I failed, I learned, I analyzed, studied, and helped eventually develop a technique of hypothermia, which is cooling the body down. That was the only thing that really has improved on this today. I won't go over the 20 years of learning, but today our mortality, although certainly not perfect, as published is 3 to 4%, when still the national average is 16 to 17%. I've had the opportunity to teach surgeons this technique from almost every country in the world. Recently, I finished a book chapter technique of this that will be distributed internationally. So in conclusion, what have I learned over 45 years? Learning is a lifelong process, and my Catholic education, I'm convinced, was a great foundation. It taught me self-discipline, what I call honest self-criticism. So if I can impart some advice, it would be learn from your mentors. Try to add something along the way to make the world a little better, and try to pass it on. Be a mentor. Surrounding yourself with good people, it's important, just success and happiness. And speaking of that, my best mentor and partner for these 45 years is another thing I got from Monterey, my wife, 40 years. And the third thing I'd advise is if you don't have failures, you're probably never likely to reach your full potential. And I'll share one final personal trial. My first application to medical school, I failed and reapplied, obviously got in. So don't give up, learn from others, teach others, and I believe happiness will follow.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Bishop Thompson, and the benefactors of Memorial in Modern Day. What I want to talk about today is things that all modern day Memorial graduates already know, and that is the essential elements of good work. This presentation today on the future of jobs, I can speculate for you, but I would like to try to prove to you, using a testing technique called symmetric time testing, that some of the essential elements of good work will never change, whereas how we work will always change. Now, the scientists in the room and the engineers are saying, whoa, you just made two big mistakes. You said always, and you said never. Nothing brings the iconoclast out of the wall, out of the woodwork faster than those two words. But I think I can satisfy you. But in order to do a time symmetry test, you have to go back in time. Climatologists do this. It's not a perfect technique. That's why we have this furious debate about global warming. But I think in our case, this will work. We have to go back in time to prove that why and what we work for will never change. I went back to Adam Smith. Adam Smith, however, in The Wealth of Nations and The Invisible Hand and the Theory of Moral Sensibilities, did not quite satisfy me. It was mechanistic, it was a flow and ebb of supply and demand, and it was how money changed hands. For the purposes of my argument, I decided to exclude money as a motivator because many people do very, very good work for modest wages, or in the case of voluntarism, no wages at all. So I went back in time and continued to go back in time and stopped at 1,500 years ago. Now the people from St. Mindred are already starting to catch on here. 1,500 is not an arbitrary number. That's the time when a man who was not a philosopher, scientist, or economist wrote a great deal about work. Most of his rules, however, applied to the monastery and to the abbatical system that ensures the spiritual and physical health of the monastic life. But he also was dedicated to work. These rules are eponymously known as the Rules of St. Benedict. He wrote 73 chapters of rules. If you read these rules, you realize one thing: St. Benedict hated loopholes. So chapter 4 of the Rules of St. Benedict are entitled The Instruments of Good Work, and it's quite complete. The Benedictine motto is Ora et Labora. Now, after After meeting the memorial students yesterday and today, I'm sure that this lecture, or this presentation, is totally redundant. I was so impressed with our students. They're magnificent. But in the instruments of good works, obviously, rule number one is good work is work that pleases God, glorifies God, and loves God. We would expect that, wouldn't we? Rules 2 through 8 are basically the 10 Commandments, but there's one glaring exception which mystified me for a while. And that is the fourth commandment's missing. And what is the fourth commandment? Honor thy father and mother. That's odd. It's not there. So I kept reading, and I can tell you, these words are translated from the Latin, and furthermore, St. Benedict was not an eloquent writer. He was a rule maker and an absolutist. But in chapter 54, you get a hint of why the parents were left out. Certainly the parents must have been irritating to him because he wrote a rule about it. Their incessant inquiries, letters, and gifts. So in chapter 54, he says all letters will be delivered to the intended recipient only with the approval of the abbot. Gifts become property of the monastery and will be distributed according to need. So I would have to guess, although I can't prove, the fourth commandment's left out of the top 10 for a reason. But at any rate, the rules go on to state that good work relieves the poor. Good work helps out in trouble. Good work consoles the suffering. Good work does not give way to anger. Good work does not seek revenge. It does not entertain deceit in the heart. It is honest work. Good work benefits the community. It does not engender false peace. It does not forsake charity. Good workers always speak the truth with heart and tongue. This goes on and on and on. I can spend all day, but I won't, so I'm going to skip ahead. Good work is not proud and gives credit to others rather than to self. Good workers are not given to wine. Now, here's one Dr. Fehrenbacher and I have both fallen down on repeat. Good workers aren't drowsy. So I can assure you, after staying up all night doing a heart transplant or a lung transplant, we were drowsy quite often. So we kind of fell down on that. Good workers don't detract, they're positive. They don't gossip. They don't use wicked speech, and they're willing to listen. They hate no one, they're not jealous, they do not entertain envy. They do not love strife. They do not love pride. They honor the aged, they teach the young, and they protect the young. Make peace with all adversaries before the setting of the sun, and never despair of God's mercy. I would submit to you over the last 15 years, those rules haven't changed at all, and they won't change in the future. Now, let me speak to opportunities. Our students have more opportunities than we have ever had. And they're wonderful students, and they're going to take advantage of them. Science is in the process of fracturing right now. Many, many specialties are being developed that were never even heard of 10 years ago. Mark Browning, our oncologist here in the room, knows that cancer is now being treated by gene targeting. People can receive drugs like Chuck Pagano, who was dead 10 years ago, and get very long remissions by a drug that targets a specific gene. Every lung cancer I take out undergoes genetic testing. If they're epithelial growth factor receptor positive or ALK positive, anaplastic lymphoma kinase positive, there are 2 drugs available now that give these patients very long remissions that weren't available 5 years ago. Advances in molecular biology, conformational chemistry, make drug development much, much quicker. Rather than having to test 1,000 different compounds, they can use a computer, analyze the geometric configuration of the receptor that the proposed drug might affect, and then design a drug around that receptor. It's a miracle. There are many, many other advances made in the biomedical science our students will have an opportunity to study. Cellular repair, which was mentioned earlier. Cellular repair leads to tissue repair. That means joint replacement surgery will go away and tissues will be repaired. But that begs the question, if you can repair tissues, why can't you repair an entire organ? Well, you can. And the transplants that Dr. Fehrenbacher and I did and worked so hard on for so many years will go away. And people will receive drugs called Region and Angio Maximus. I made those up, by the way. Will be given to patients, and their heart will repair itself, or their kidney will repair itself, or their liver will repair itself. In 100 years, doctors will look back on Dr. Fehrenbacher and myself and say that they were clever mechanics, but they were very crude. These things will happen. The discoveries that will be made by our students. I am extremely heartened after having met some of them. They are very fine people. Our future is a good one. We have many reasons to be positive. I have one caveat that comes from Thomas Merton, though, that I want to pass along to the students because I was guilty of it myself. And that is this. Merton said, it's hard to be free if you are in love with slavery, either due to greed, personal ambition, or the desire for material things. Take care of yourselves, take care of your families, take care of your church, your school, your community, your neighbors, and take the time to do so. If you work for money or you work for material things, there's never enough, and you'll become a slave. Thank you so much for allowing me this great privilege.
Thank you, Dr. Fehrenbacher and Dr. Beckman. We sincerely appreciate you being with us today. Special thanks to all of our speakers for being with us today, and congratulations to our Tomorrow's Workforce Leadership Award recipients. Once again, thank you to all of our sponsors and supporters. Mater Dei and Memorial High School will continue to rise the educational challenges we face in our world.
It has been a pleasure joining you today and sharing our accomplishments and future plans. Mater Dei and Memorial High School have proven results. Our outcomes are measurable and will prepare us to enter the workforce as knowledgeable, capable, and lifelong learners. On behalf of the students, faculty, and staff of Mater Dei and Memorial, the Tomorrow Workforce Committee, and the Board of Trustees of Mater Dei and Rice Memorial High School, thanks you for joining us today. We know that you agree supporting our high schools is not only a good thing to do, it is also a wise business investment in the future of our community. We look forward to being tomorrow's workforce.